Amer Jamil. The Sheikh has been described by the Sunday Herald as Scotland's leading Islamic scholar. He was born and brought up in Glasgow and has a law degree from Strathclyde University and a BA Honours in Islamic Studies from the University of Wales. In total, he spent 10 years studying the Arabic language and Islamic sciences. He has teaching licenses in various Islamic subjects which he studied. He is the co-founder of the Solace Foundation, an organisation which provides Islamic education and guidance on contemporary Islamic issues in the West. His main field of interest is primarily Muslim family law, an area in which he has studied in depth, having studied all 4 schools of Islamic jurisprudence. And finally, in 2007, he authored the book What Islam Really Says About Domestic Abuse, a work which shattered the myth that Islam allows domestic abuse. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome the Sheikh for 45 minutes.
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, salatu wassalamu ala ashfal anbiya wal mursaleen, Sayyidina Muhammadin wa alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Wa ba'd, I'd like to greet you all with the greetings of Islam. Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you all. I'll just say that again. I'll greet you again with the greetings of Islam. Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you all. Thank you. So you guys are awake now. Today's talk, what was the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon, really like? I think it's a very important talk, as I'm going to talk about maybe some aspects of his life. It's very, very difficult to try to summarise his whole life in 45 minutes. I'm actually going to do it quicker than that. I thought it was 45 minutes in total, so I'll only be speaking for about maybe 25-30 minutes, and then I'll give it over to you guys to ask the questions, because sometimes I always think in these kind of situations it's more the question answers, because I can talk about what I want to talk about, but it's always good to give the podium to the audience to hear what they want to ask. So that's what we'll probably do about half an hour. And also, all the educationalists will tell me after 25 minutes, the people's concentration span seems to dip. So I don't want to put you guys to sleep. So inshallah, we'll only stick to about half an hour. First of all, before going into any aspect of his life, I want to just draw your attention to some comments which non-Muslim intellectuals have made about the Prophet Muhammad. You might say, well, I'm a Muslim, I'm a scholar, obviously I'm going to be biased, I'm going to give a one-dimensional understanding of the Prophet. So it's good to see what people who didn't believe in him as a prophet, what they said. And Montgomery Watt, right, I chose him first because obviously he taught in Edinburgh, so there's a slight bias there. So he was a professor of Arabic and Islamic studies at the University of Edinburgh, and he said, moreover, none of the great figures of history is so poorly appreciated in the West as Muhammad. And this is from George Bernard Shaw. He says, he must be called the saviour of humanity. I believe that if a man like him were to assume the dictatorship of the modern world, I don't like the word dictatorship, but never mind, he would succeed in solving its problems in a way that would bring it much needed peace and happiness. And the thing is, these are people who have obviously spent some time studying his life, studying his biography. And this is quite interesting. This is from Michael Hart, who wrote a book called The 100, a ranking of the most influential persons in history. So he wrote a book, he looked at history, different historical figures, and he gave them rankings in accordance to how successful they were, and also how much influence they actually exerted on the rest of mankind in history. And as a non-Muslim, it's quite interesting that he put Muhammad, peace be upon him, as the first choice. So he says, my choice of Muhammad to lead the list of the world's most influential persons may surprise some readers and may be questioned by others. But he was the only man in history who was supremely successful on both the religious and secular levels. And if any of you have actually studied especially the personality and also the characteristics of the Prophet, one running theme that you'll see is that there was complete balance in his approach and also his life. This is what Michael Hart's picked up, because there was obviously some prophets, you look at them, they were a spiritual dimension to them, whereas if you look at the prophethood of Muhammad, peace and blessings upon him, he was a father, he was a husband, he was a son, he was a leader, he was a political leader, he was a tradesman. You see different aspects of his life, and because you see so many different facets of his life, everyone can take something from it, making him an easy role model for everybody. And lastly, Washington Irving said, in his private dealings he was just. He treated friends and strangers, the rich and the poor, the powerful and the weak, with equity, and was beloved by the common people for the affability with which he received them and listened to their complaints. And there's many others, I can quote Gandhi and other people as well, but I'll suffice with these 4 people. And the reason I've got this quote as the last one, because it's kind of what I'm going to talk about next. A bit more into the life of this man, to see what was he really like as a person. And the verse that the brother recited, there was a particular verse in there which is very relevant to what I'm going to talk about today. وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. We did not send you except as a mercy to all of mankind. And it's interesting, it says Alameen, the worlds, and it doesn't say Muslimin, to the Muslims. It wasn't that he was sent as a mercy just for the Muslims, but to everybody. And therefore, I'm going to concentrate, for the beginning, on that aspect of mercy and his characteristic. But before that, the Quran describes the Prophet ﷺ as being on a grand character, khuluqin azim, a great or a vast characteristic. And the Prophet himself said, I've only been sent to perfect good character. And when the Prophet, peace and blessings upon him, was asked, what is righteousness, what's good, what's goodness, what's piety, what does it mean to be a good person? He said, it is good character. So one of the things, and he's obviously an embodiment of that, but one of the things that he promoted throughout his life and he encouraged everyone to excel in was to have a good character. So therefore there was an emphasis on being a good person, on having a good character. Indeed, for the most beloved of you to me, and the closest of you to me on the day of judgment, are the best of you in character. And one of the things as Muslims is that we're taught to love the Prophet of God, and we're also taught to love him more than we love our parents and other creation. And one of the things that you want to, or you hope as a Muslim, is that in the hereafter you have a close proximity to the Prophet of God. And therefore the Prophet is telling us, if you want to be close to me, right, which we all Muslims do, then it's going to be those people who are best in their character. And therefore he said that which will weigh the heaviest in the balance in the hereafter is good character. Interestingly, he was known as the trustworthy one. And this is even before he became a prophet. He was called Al-Amin, which means a trustworthy one. There was an incident where, this is prior to his prophethood, where they were rebuilding the holy house, the Kaaba. You might have seen the cube designed building in Mecca. You probably see it on TV. However, when they were rebuilding it, a fight broke out over one precious stone, who was going to put it back. And they were, they used to get very fired up, almost to killing each other. And they said, well, what we'll do is the next person to come through, we'll let that person decide. And it was the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, and they were happy because they said it's Al-Amin, it's the trustworthy one. Right? So in other words, even before prophethood, they actually trusted him. They felt that he was a trustworthy person, and he managed to avert that fight and also managed to solve that situation. And then after prophethood, an interesting incident happens. After prophethood, he's trying to call his people to the worship of one God, and what he does is he goes out to the mountain of Safa, which is just slightly, at that time, slightly outside of Makkah at that time, and he calls the people of Makkah to him. And he says to them, if I were to tell you that behind me is an army advancing to attack Makkah, what would you say? And they said, we believe you because you're the trustworthy one. We know that you don't lie. Right? So it kind of caught them, because the next bit was, well, I'm the prophet of God, I've been given a message, and I'm bringing it to you, and accept it. At which point they were kind of stuck, because they just admitted that he doesn't lie, and they trust him. Right? But out of their stubbornness, they rejected the message. But what was interesting was that when he asked that question, they all replied, we know that you don't lie. So they knew that he did not lie from his character. And another interesting aspect is that even though they disagreed with him, and even though they were showing enmity towards him, and trying to ruin his reputation in a sense, they were actually still giving their trusts to him. So they would bring a trust and leave it with him, because they knew he was trustworthy, they knew that he wouldn't defraud them. So he actually, even though the same people were trying to attack him, they were also leaving their trusts with him, which is quite strange. And in fact, when he does eventually leave Makkah to go to Medina, because it's got too difficult to live in Makkah, and he's told, in fact, not just himself, all his followers to go to Medina. They all leave, and he's one of the last to leave. And what he does is his cousin Ali, he leaves him behind. So even the last ones to leave, one of the last ones is the Prophet himself. He's upon him, but he also leaves his cousin. The reason he left his cousin was, he said that I've got certain trusts which the Meccans have given me, which I need you to go and give it back to the rightful owner. Right? So even though they're trying to attack him and they're against him, he's actually got their trusts with him. And so, going back to that verse I was talking about, the fact he was described as a mercy, really interesting is that, obviously, it's very natural to have mercy towards people of your own faith. It's very natural to have mercy towards your own family. But it's not very often you find that people have mercy with their enemies. And this is an incident in the second battle that took place, which was the Battle of Uhud. And the Prophet was actually injured in that battle. And his companions said, if only you were to pray against them, because they knew that he's the Prophet of God, and if the Prophet of God asks God something, God's going to answer him. And so what does he say? He says, I was not sent as a curser, right, to pray against people. Rather, I was sent as a caller and a mercy. And then, it's really interesting, he says, oh Allah, forgive my people, for they know not. Two things, my people, these are people who are trying to kill you. So these are people throwing arrows at you, right, trying to kill you with their swords. And what's he saying? He's praying for them, that, oh Allah, forgive them, because they don't not know. Because if they knew he was a prophet of God, they wouldn't fight him. And there's another incident which is very similar to this, where he goes to a place called Ta'if, which is outside Makkah, and he calls the people to Islam there, and they chase him out. They get their children to throw stones at him, so much that he's bleeding, and he actually faints out of fatigue. And the angel is sent by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and says that, look, if you wish, God will order the angel who was in charge of the mountains, and he will crush these people. And that time the Prophet says, no, I pray that one day people from amongst them or from their lineage will become Muslims, which they did. But again, you see this over and over and over again in his life, that he never wished anything bad for people who were attacking him. All he ever wished was good for them. In other words, all he ever had in his heart was overwhelming mercy for other people. Just different aspects. Mercy with children. He, peace and blessings upon him, kissed his grandsons in the company of a person called Arqa, who said, I have children, not one of whom I have ever kissed, Prophet of God, peace be upon him, looked at him and said, those who do not show mercy will not be shown mercy. In other words, if you want to have mercy from God, you want to be forgiven by God, then you've got to learn to show mercy and to forgive other people. Another instant, he said that sometimes he would be praying and he would like to lengthen his prayer because he enjoyed reciting the Quran. It's a conversation between you and God, and he would enjoy this and he would like to lengthen it. But he said if he heard a child crying, he would shorten it because of the anxiety that the mother would be feeling because of the child crying. So this mercy in his heart, right, for this one person, he would shorten the prayer for everybody. Mercy with orphans. Like I said before, every Muslim aspires to be as close to the Prophet of God in the hereafter. So he said, I and the one who looks after and provides for an orphan will be like this in paradise. And then he put up his two fingers. Right? In other words, if you want to be that close to me in the hereafter, then the person who looks after an orphan or provides for them, they'll be like with me, like this in paradise. And if you ever go to like charities, Islamic Charity, Islam Relief, or other ones, they'll always use this saying of the Prophet, peace be upon him, to encourage people to sponsor orphans around the world. A man complained of the hardness of his heart, so the Prophet said to him, pat the head of orphans and feed the poor. In other words, show mercy to them, show some affection, because these are people who their parents, they don't have parents, so that love, that natural love they would have got from their parents is not there, so we should be extra compassionate towards them. Mercy with animals, it wasn't just that his mercy was restricted to mankind, right, to his enemies or to children, to orphans. Going back to that verse, Rahmatan lil Alameen, mercy for all mankind, all of creation, all the worlds. He was also merciful to animals. And so he passed by a severely thin camel and he remarked that fear God where these animals are concerned, take care of them when you ride them. In other words, don't overburden them when you ride them. And when you eat them, in other words, when you slaughter them in a good way. And also, he forbade provoking animals to make them fight one another. You know, like these dog fights or you get two cockerels to fight each other. He forbade that. Forgiveness, which is obviously linked to his mercy. He said, show mercy to those on the earth, so that the one who is in the heaven will show mercy unto you. And also he said, whoever suffers an injury done to him and forgives the person responsible, God will raise him in his status to a higher degree and remove one of his sins. So not only was he very merciful and also forgiving of other people, he was encouraging his companions to adopt the same characteristics. Kind and gentle, he said, the believers with the most complete faith are the best of them in character, and the kindness of them to their families. Aisha, his wife, was asked how the Prophet, peace be upon him, was when he was alone amongst his household, and she replied, she described him, she said he was the gentlest of people, smiling and laughing. Right? So he wasn't this harsh, person in the house, ordering people about, get me this, get me that. He was very relaxed, very easygoing, and gentle towards his family. Anas, and this was a young companion, and he actually was one of the oldest ones to survive after, from the companions, because he was so young at the time. But he said he spent 10 years with the Prophet in the Prophet's company, and he said, not once did he revile me, nor did he beat me, nor did he scold me, nor did he frown at me, nor did he ever reprimand me for being negligent with something that he had instructed me to do. And there's an instant where he was told to do something by the Prophet, peace be upon him, and he was a child, so he went outside, saw the children playing, and he joined in, so he's playing, and after a while the Prophet comes, and when when he meets the Prophet, he realizes, oh, I had to do that, such and such. So he thinks, I'm in trouble now. So the Prophet never told him off. He never said, why did you do that? That's it, no dinner for you or whatever, right? He said, have you done such and such? All he did was remind him. All he did was remind him. That's why he said, he never told me off. And he also said, the best people from among you are those who are best to their wives, and I am the best of you towards my wives. Another characteristic you'll find in the Prophet of God is that he was very humble. Right? He wasn't, like a dictator kind of, very arrogant kind of person. A lot of these leaders, there's a trail of 100 people behind them, fighting all over them. But he was very humble. He just lived like any other person. And in fact, it's described that when he used to walk, he used to look towards the ground more than he looked towards the sky. He's a very humble person. And he said, Allah Almighty revealed to me that you must be all humble, so that no one thinks themselves better than any other, and no one oppresses another. So it's a very humble person. There's one instant where one of his companions, Umar, he came in and the Prophet had been sleeping, and he wasn't sleeping on a lavish bed, he was just sleeping on the floor with a cloth, and he'd got some like wood or whatever to like kind of make a cushion, and if you sleep on it, it left a kind of print on his face. And Umar looked at him, he said, and he was crying, and he said, he said that the kings of Persia or whatever, they live in palaces, they sleep on lavish, luxurious beds. And he said, you're the Prophet of God, and you look at the state, you basically look at this, the print left in your face. And he said, Umar, he said, what have I got from this world? I'm just like a traveller. In other words, it doesn't matter. This is not what I'm here for. I'm not here to, live life up and, live the life of a king. Equality, he taught that people were equal, and he treated people equally as well. He said there's no superiority for an Arab over a non-Arab, nor for a non-Arab over an Arab, nor for a fair-skinned person over a person with dark skin, nor for a dark-skinned person over a person with fair skin. Whoever is more pious and God-fearing is more deserving of honour. So basically he just wiped away all the classes, the differences between slaves and free people, men and women, and he just said, look, the criteria with God is how pious you are. It doesn't matter who you are, tall or big, small, age, colour, gender. It's about your relationship with God. And whoever is more pious is closer and a better person. Generosity. Jabir, who is also a companion, said that the Messenger of God was never asked for anything to which he said no. And there's an instant where a Bedouin man came across him and he grabbed him from the robe. So he grabbed him and left a mark. And the Bedouin said, "O Muhammad, give me some of the wealth of Allah that you possess." So the Prophet never said to him, "Look, what are you doing?" or didn't reprimand him. He just looked at him and smiled, and gave him a nice smile, and then ordered that his request should be granted. And one of the things that you find is that the Prophet of God, he was extremely good at dealing with people at their own level. So he could deal with leaders at their level, he could deal with children, he could deal with all sorts of people from any sector of society. And he also was very accommodating and very patient with the Bedouins, because he knew these people were, they live in the desert, they're very harsh, they have a harsh kind of personality, and so he didn't reprimand them for being like that. He just accepted the way they were. There's another incident where a Bedouin comes into the Prophet's mosque and starts to urinate, and the companions all jump up like they would if somebody urinated in the mosque today to stop them. And he just says to him, "Leave him alone, let him finish." When he finishes, he goes up to him and he says, "This is a mosque, it's a place of worship, blah blah blah, it's not for urinating, etc, etc. And he just orders for a bucket of water to be poured over where he urinated. And this was, so his approach was education. The reason this person did this is because he's not educated, he doesn't know. So the way you rectify it is by educating him in a nice, gentle way that he'll understand. Serving others. His wife, like I said, he didn't live a life of a king, ordering people about. He used to serve other people, lead by example. His wife was asked what he was like around the house, and she replied, he was at the service of his family. On one occasion, that's in his household, on one occasion, there was his companions, they were very thirsty, they were wanting to get water, they're all kind of vying over the water, and the Prophet said, look, everyone's going to get something to drink, just calm down. And so what he does is he begins to pour water, and he himself serves the people, and once they're all finished and all satisfied, he himself drinks. When? Not first, last. So this is him serving his creation, or serving his companions. Neighbours, he taught that whoever believes in God and the last day should be generous to his neighbour. That he who sleeps on a full stomach whilst his neighbour goes hungry is not one of us. And also he encouraged us to add water to our cooking in order to increase the volume of food so that we could share it with our neighbours. So he emphasised this a lot, the way we behave with our neighbours, whether they're Muslim or non-Muslim. The fact that they live near you means that you have responsibilities towards them. In fact, there's another saying of the Prophet where, peace be upon, where he kept saying, kept enjoining to be good towards a neighbour until one of the companions said, I thought that that our neighbour will probably end up inheriting from me. Due to the kind of emphasis that the Prophet was putting on being good to one's neighbour.